I'm going to show you how to build and deploy your own REST API service for free using a Compose HTML framework called Kobweb. Now here I have one web service that I have deployed for the demonstration purposes. So let's open it up. I'm going to open up this URL and actually show you how this web service will work. So in this project I'm going to show you how to create your own REST API, and now let me show you the actual endpoint that I have prepared for the demonstration purposes. So let's access here the API directory, then get people, and I'm going to here specify, for example, count equal to, let's say, number 3. Press enter. And here as a response we have received one object, one API response object of a type of a success, which holds the data, or actually a list of multiple different person objects. In this case we have retrieved 3 different user objects or person objects, and we can modify this query to customize how many items we want to retrieve. Also, if we specify here some number that actually does not exist, like for example -1, and press enter, then we are going to receive here an error message instead. So if you want to learn how to build and deploy your own REST API with Kotlin, watch this video until the end. So I'm going to skip the steps where I'm showing you how to set up and install a Kobweb on your PC, because I have already shown that in one of my previous videos. Anyhow, for those of you who are not familiar with the Kobweb, it's one amazing framework built on top of the Compose HTML that allows you to build not just the front end, but also a back end as well. And in this video, I will show you exactly that. I will show you how to build and deploy your own REST API server for free. You can check out and read some more information about the Kobweb framework on this GitHub link. Anyhow, let's get started. So I'm going to first open up a terminal or a CMD in order to use a Kobweb framework to clone one of its empty repositories or templates that we can use out of the box. So the first thing, I'm going to navigate to my D partition, and I'm going to here go to the Kobweb directory which I have just made. If you don't have this directory, you can just use a command mkdir and then the actual name of the directory in order to create a directory. Something like that. Anyhow, I'm going to now just open up that directory and go inside. So cd, and within this directory I'm going to now run one command which is called Kobweb space create. And this command will allow us to basically clone one of those templates from a Kobweb. So there are quite a few different templates that we can choose. In this case, I'm going to go to this empty one. So select the one that you like and press enter. Next, we need to specify a folder name for our project. In this case, I'm going to write here demo API. We can also specify the title, so the same one, demo API. The next one, we can specify the group ID for our project. For example, com.example.demo API. We are now being asked whether we want to use a Silk, which is a powerful UI layer built on top of the Compose for Web. Just type here yes. Now this question is also important one, because we are being asked whether we want to use the API behavior for a Kobweb. Just type here yes and press enter. For the markdown support, I'm going to type here no, because I don't need it at this point. We are now being asked whether we want to use a Git for this project. Type here yes, yes, and the initial commit message as well. Press enter. And there you go. So now we have successfully created or cloned this template. So let's now open up the IntelliJ IDE. Let's close that. So here I'm using IntelliJ IDE as a development environment. I'm going to now open up that same project that I have just cloned. So demo API. This is the one. Click OK. This window. And now, as you can see, we are going to see here one demo and empty template project. So let's just close all of that. Just wait until this Gradle finishes building this project. Okay, so if you're seeing this kind of error in your project after you open it up, you just need to open up the settings Gradle file, and here you need to rename this project name to be capitalized. So in this case, we have a demo API name which has a D and a A characters capitalized. So just capitalize those 2 letters, sync the project, and everything will work just fine. Now let me show you around. So here we of course have a project level Gradle build file. We also have a couple of different README files as well. Now inside the site module we have a source, and within the source we have two different source sets. We have a JS main and a JVM main. Now the JS main is used for the front-end applications, while the JVM main is used for the backend. In this video specifically, we are going to focus on a JVM main only. Now we also have a Gradle build file that is located within this site module. And down below we can also see what kind of plugins and dependencies are included within all those different source sets. So in the JS main we have those, and in the JVM main we have only one. Now before we start and continue with this project, I want to add one more dependency in our JVM main, and that will be a Kotlin X serialization library, because we're going to have a couple of different model classes that we will need to serialize before we can send them back to our users. Also, all those dependencies here that you can see are located within a version catalog file. So let's press here Shift 2 times and press .toml. So we can search for a version catalog file. So this is one, libs.versions.toml. Let's open up that file, and here you're going to see all different kind of dependencies that we have included within our Gradle build file. So we have libraries and respective plugins as well. And on the top, of course, we have the versions that we are using on each and every one of those lines of code. Now let's go back to our web browser, and here I'm going to just use this Kotlin X serialization library and include that in my version catalog. So first I'm going to use the plugin here. Let's go back. Let's create here a new line of code. Let's name this serialization plugin, and here I'm going to replace that with a new string, and the version here needs to be the same as our Kotlin version. Now let's also go back and let's see what kind of implementation we need for our dependencies. So in this case we're going to choose this one, so Kotlin X serialization, and the version is 1.5.1. Let's go back, type here Kotlin X, so 1.5.1, create here a new dependency, so Kotlin X serialization, paste that new implementation string, and here just specify Kotlin X, which is the version that we have just defined right here. And after you do that, just go to the Gradle build file and let's link that new dependency. So even though here we have written Kotlin X, then a /, in our Gradle build file we are replacing this / with a dot. So let's type here libs.kotlinx.serialization. And now let's sync the project. Perfect. And now that we have everything we need for our project to work, we can close both of those files, and let's open up our JVM main source set. Here we have, as you can see, a default API package. We have a default README file which basically points to a documentation about the API routes. We can just remove that for now because we don't need it. I'm going to show you everything you need to know for now. So before we create our API endpoint that we're going to use to actually request some data and send some responses, I'm going to create here a new directory or a package with the name of models. And within these models, I'm going to create the first model class that will be named a user. So let's create here a data class, user. And this user class will have only two different properties. So let's define here the first one with the name of a string type, and the second one, for example, age of an integer type. Now this user data class needs to be serialized, which is why we need to annotate this same class with a serializable annotation. And this annotation is a part of a Kotlin X serialization library. Okay, so here we have a warning saying that the Kotlin X serialization compiler plugin is not applied. So I have forgot to specify also a plugin as well. So let's just scroll all the way up. And here let's call our actual Kotlin X or serialization plugin. So that's the name of our plugin from our version catalog. So serialization plugin, there you go. That's the same name. Click sync, let's sync the project. Alright, now we can close that, and now that warning will disappear. The next thing, I'm going to also create here one more model class, and that model class will be used to actually wrap our user in a response class. So I'm going to create here one seal class. So let's here just type a simple class, and then I'm going to add a sealed keyword. So I'm going to name this class API response. This will be a seal class. And I'm going to also annotate this class with a serializable annotation. Now, this API response class will contain two different child classes, success and error. So let's here create one data class with the name of a success. This class will have only one parameter, a data of a type of a list of a user. Or we can name this actual class to be person, so it makes more sense. So a person, there you go. And this class needs to return this API response. There you go. The second one will also be a data class with a different name of error, and it will hold one string value which will be named error message. So string value, and also let's here inherit from an API response class as well. Now, even though we have specified here a serializable on our API response seal class, we also need to add that on both of those classes as well. So just add that right there, and we need to specify one more, a serial name. In this case here I'm going to specify success, so success, and down below we can specify error. So all lowercase letters. Alright, so now that we have our two model classes that we're going to need for our REST API to work, and now we can proceed and actually create our first API endpoint. So let's here in our API directory create a new Kotlin file with the name of getPeople. Now this API endpoint that I'm going to create right now will have only one purpose: to serve the data to our users who request the data from this same endpoint. And the actual data that we're going to serve to our users will be wrapped within the API response that will hold a list of multiple different person objects. And each person will of course contain the name and the age. So let's now go back to our getPeople Kotlin file, and here in order to create our first endpoint we need to create here a suspend function with the name, for example, getPeople. Now this function, this API function needs to have only one parameter, which is the context of a type of API context. And also we need to annotate our function with the API annotation, okay? Because this annotation will identify our function as the one that will be used to serve the result of an API call. Now this actual endpoint will respond on GET requests, which is why here the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to add a try and catch block, so that we can actually catch any potential exceptions as well. And the first thing that we need to do when a user sends a request to our endpoint, first we need to check whether that request contains some parameters. So let's here create a variable number. Because this API endpoint will accept only one parameter, a number, the number of how many people or objects we want to serve to our users. So the first thing, let's call this a context, and let's specify here a request property. So this request is a request that we're going to get from our users, and from that request I want to get the parameters. So let's here call get value, and as a key I'm going to write here count. So this will be a key of the parameter under which users can request how many people objects they want to retrieve. And then after I get this value, I'm going to convert this value into an integer value, because this parameter will actually represent an integer value, right? Below that I'm going to also create one variable, people, and here for now I'm going to just store, or actually hard code, a couple of different person objects that we are going to serve to our users. So a name equal to my name, the age will be, for example, 25. The next object will have some different values. Let's create here 4 different objects, so with different values and different names here as well. For example, Mary and Anna. We could also create this variable outside of this function as a top level variable, right? So we could also do that. And here what we're going to do, we're going to also call this a context and actually use this response property right now in order to send a response. So let's here call res and the type set body text. Now here as a body text we need to actually serialize the data that we want to send back to our users. So in this case, I'm going to call here a JSON, then encode to string, because we want to encode this data into a string so that we can actually send it back as a JSON in our response. So encode to string. The type here will be an API response. Here let's call API response.success, and as a data I'm going to call here a people.take, and then as a parameter I'm going to specify that the same number that we have received as a parameter. So if you're seeing here this error, you need to make sure that you are using the right import. So let's just here call encode to string. There you go. We have now the right import, and if we catch here some exception, then we also want to send back a response, but this time that the response will actually be an error response, where the error message will be the message that we are getting from this catch block. So e.message.toString. Okay, so now let's rewind once again what this function will actually do. So this function will represent an API endpoint on our server, and this function will be able to retrieve a parameter under a name of account, and this count will represent the actual number of how many objects, person objects, we want to retrieve and send back to our users who actually requested that data. So now I'm going to actually launch this server locally and then show you how this will actually work. After that, I'm going to also show you how we can deploy this server so that everyone around the world can access that. So first let's open up the terminal here. We need to navigate to a site directory, and then from the site directory we need to run a command kobweb run to run our server. Just wait until this server is started, and then you need to go to the local host on your web browser in order to access that same API endpoint. Now, if you're wondering under which name we actually can access this API endpoint, well, by default, as you can see, this function is placed within the file that has the name of getPeople, which means that if we don't override that name route, it will be used as a default one. Alright, and after you see this message Kobweb server is running, it means that you can access now that same server. So let's open up a web browser. I'm going to here type a localhost, then a /API, because inside the API directory we actually contain that API endpoint, and here just type get people. Okay, press enter, and now we're going to receive here an error message. So as you can see, type here is error, which is actually our API response error type, and the error message is key count is missing in the map, which means that we actually need to specify here a count parameter. So let's add here a question mark, then a count, and for example let's specify number 3. So immediately after we press enter, then we are going to receive here a success response, and that response will contain the data or a list of multiple different person objects. So in this case we have 3 different person objects. So as you can see, 1, 2 and 3. Here if we request for example number 2, then we're going to receive here 2 different items. We can also specify number 1, there you go. And if we specify some number that is actually greater than the one that we have, in this case, nothing will happen except we're going to retrieve all those person objects that are actually available in that list. Also, if we specify here maybe -1, then we're going to receive here an error message. The requested element count -1 is less than 0. And this message was sent from the catch block of our API response or API endpoint, as you can see from there. So now you can see how easy it is to actually implement and create your own endpoints using a Kobweb. And now that you have seen how we have deployed this server locally, I'm going to also show you how you can deploy that on a web hosting so that everyone around the world can access your API server. So I'm going to use here a web hosting which is called render.com. So let's access this render.com. If you don't have an account, be sure to sign in here. Anyhow, I already have an account and I'm already logged in here in this website. So once you get into your dashboard, you're going to see here all your projects if you have them, of course. And if you don't have your project, then you need to click here New, then a web service, select that one. And now here, if you haven't connected your GitHub profile, be sure that you're connected your GitHub profile, because we're going to use that GitHub to directly deploy our repository. Before we do that, of course, we need to push that project on a GitHub. So I'm going to now go here, so file, or actually git, then GitHub, share project on a GitHub. I'm going to also make this repository public, but you can also leave that as a private, so it will work either way. Anyhow, press a share button. Let's now wait until our actual project is pushed on a GitHub. There you go. So it's successfully pushed. We can also commit all those changes that we have made until then. So let's here commit. So we can say here REST API completed. There you go. So commit and push. We have some warnings, but nevertheless, we can just commit that anyway. Let's push that new commit. And there is only one more thing that needs to be done. So before we can push our project, we also need to create here a Docker file, which is going to be used to instruct this actual web service on how to install and run our server. Now, for that purpose, I'm going to here open up the root of our project, and here I'm going to create the new file. So let's create here a new file with the name of a Docker file. Press enter, and here I'm going to paste the code which we're going to use to actually deploy that API server on render.com. So this is our Docker file, and most of you are not familiar with its syntax, but nevertheless, as you can see from this code right here, you can assume what it's going to do. So in this case, we are declaring some variables like the Kobweb binary version. Down below, we are downloading some dependencies that we're going to need to actually run the Kobweb. Down below, we are also unzipping and downloading a Kobweb binary on that server. So we are basically instructing a render.com web service on how to install our REST API. Down below, we are also unzipping that binary. We are removing that unnecessary zip file after we have unzipped that file. And down below, as you can see, we are doing some other different commands. We are exporting our project and so on and so on. Now let's just commit this new change. So Docker file added. Now let's commit and push this new change. There we go. And after we have successfully added and pushed this Docker file, and now it's time to actually deploy our web service. So let's see what we have here. I'm going to now reload this once again so that we can actually find that the newest repository. So demo API, there it is. Click connect. And of course, if you don't see this window right here, then you need to select here a button, connect GitHub, and actually connect your account. In this case, I'm going to now connect this demo API project. All right, so the first thing, let's choose the name for our service. I'm going to name this demo API. I'm going to leave all other different fields as a default one. And down below, we can also see what kind of instance we're going to use. So in this case, of course, we're using a free tier, which means that we're going to use only 512 megabytes for our service. But anyhow, this is just a demo project. And now let's click Create Web Service. After you press this button, we can go back to our dashboard. And there you're going to also see this message saying Deploy in Progress. So this may take a while, so just sit back and relax while the render is doing all the heavy lifting for you. And after everything is complete, we should be able to receive here a deploy succeeded message. And finally, our web service has been successfully deployed. So let's open up this demo API project, and from here we can see the actual URL that we can access in order to use our REST API. So let's open up that link. Of course, if you want to buy your own domain, you can do that from render.com, so it's up to you. Anyhow, let's open up that one. Let's go to the API directory, then get people, count equal to, let's say, maybe number 2. Press enter. And there we go. So now we have received that same response as well. There is just one more thing which I have forgot to show you. So in our project, in our get people Kotlin file, if you don't want to use this default get people name as your endpoint name, you can also override that route in this API annotation. So for example, if I specify here maybe, let's say something else, then we will be able to access this endpoint with this new name. However, you do need to know that the name here is written only in lowercase letters. So let's go back, let's open up our local host here actually. So API / something else, the question mark, count equal to, let's say, number 1. And as you can see, now we can access that same endpoint but with a different name instead. And there you go, so that's how you can easily build and deploy your first REST API service. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below, and of course be sure to like this video, but only if you find it helpful. For this video, that will be all. I'm a legend when they lay me down to rest.